A very good afternoon and Kuzu Zampola from Bhutan. Uh, as I mentioned, we have close to 200 people already joined this webinar. Uh, and there were over 300 people who signed up for this event today. So we are expecting a good audience for this very important RIGSS policy seminar on branding. Not only Bhutanese audience, we also have interested friends from outside Bhutan. So I welcome all of you, our distinguished panelists, guests, and all other participants from Bhutan as well as from abroad. Welcome to this RIGSS policy seminar on branding. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that we are having a proper seminar on the subject. So I do hope all the participants here will find today's seminar very useful and interesting. Branding is a concept in constant evolution, as we all know, with the ever-changing trends in human and societal needs and desires, be it in the form of tangible products or services, or the intangible experiences we create in our organizations, cities, or communities. Today, the discussion around branding transcends the traditional marketing parameters of products, prices, and profits to include more fundamental constituents of branding, such as people, behaviors, and experience. And from leadership and corporate branding to place and nation branding, the concept has evolved to include new dimensions and found new areas of relevance and application. For Bhutan, the advent of the development philosophy of gross national happiness, or GNH, by the fourth king has served wonders to our identity and image in the world. Indeed, GNH has introduced Bhutan to the outside world and created a very positive perception about our country. Indeed, that provides a solid foundation on which Bhutan has the opportunity to carry forward our nation branding agenda. The articulation of GNH as development with values by His Majesty the King and the transformation works currently underway in the country give us better clarity and impetus to do so. As we all know, companies and institutions and countries around the world today invest heavily on branding as a necessary strategy to gain attention and recognition, attract customers, investors, and business partners, garner international goodwill, trust, and support. And in Bhutan, branding is a fairly new concept, discussed or used only in limited spheres of tourism and some local products. Aligned to the objectives of the current reforms and the parallel focus on economic growth, there is tremendous scope and opportunity for Bhutan to embrace the idea of branding in a more serious and deliberate manner. And it is in this regard that we organizing the policy seminar today. We are very happy that we are able to put together our distinguished panelists today. And our primary attempt will be to provide a broader understanding on the concept of branding, its use, and the benefits of branding. And of course, it is our intention to organize subsequent rounds of this policy seminar on branding on more specific areas or themes in the future. So with this little introduction, I take this opportunity and honor to introduce our panelists today. Firstly, Dr. Nadir Tabasoli. Dr. Nadir Tabasoli is a professor of marketing at the London Business School, director of the CMO Survey UK, and non-executive chairman of the Brand Insight. At the London Business School, he is an academic director of the Leadership Institute, academic director of the Hive Innovation Hub, and faculty advisor of LBS Publishing. Dr. Tabasoli founded the LBS Research Lab and the LBS Walpole Luxury Management Program, and he is a recipient of the prestigious Excellence in Teaching Award at the London Business School. For more than 25 years, Professor has advised and taught organizations ranging from internet and high-tech startups to over 30 global Fortune 500 companies. Previously, he was on the faculty of the MIT Sloan School of Management where he was faculty director of the entrepreneurship program and founding director of the e-business program. His research, teaching, advising is on brands and branding. He launched Coursera's first massive open online course on brand management. In fact, that is how I got the opportunity to meet Professor while I took this course. Though the course is a Coursera course, free self-directed learning, I really enjoyed the course and approached Professor thereafter, and this is how we met. Professor helped define brand's purpose, DNA, strategy, served as an expert witness in brand disputes, representing celebrities, multinationals, and countries, advised in M&A, brand due diligence and integration, and designed and directed brand academies for several global companies. Dr. Tapasoli enjoys being a globetrotter, having lived in Australia, England, France, Germany, Spain, and the USA. So welcome to our seminar, Professor. Next, I will briefly introduce Mr. Kopak Song, my friend who has been to Bhutan and spoken at RIGSS in 2019. Kopak Song is a Singaporean country brand advisor who has worked with foreign governments to help build their nation brands. He is the author and editor of almost 40 books, including Brand Singapore, a study of Singapore's country brand, now in its third edition, launched in 2021. He has spoken on Brand Singapore extensively overseas, including in London, Oxford, Shanghai, Tokyo, and also at RIGSS in 2019. Previously, Ko was head of global media relations and strategic planning at the Economic Development Board, Singapore's foreign investment promotion agency. He was also a member of the marketing advisory panel for Singapore's current country brand, Passion Made Possible. Welcome, Ko, to our seminar. Next, we have Ambassador Pema Chodron. Ambassador Pema Chodron was appointed Foreign Secretary of Bhutan on 6 November 2021. She served as the Director General of the Department of Multilateral Affairs from March 2021. Prior to this, she served as Bhutan's resident ambassador to Belgium and the European Union with concurrent accreditation to Sweden, the Netherlands, Denmark, Finland, and Spain from April 2016 to January 2021. Ambassador Pema previously served as the resident ambassador of Bhutan to Bangladesh with concurrent accreditation to the Maldives, Pakistan, South Korea, and Sri Lanka from April 2014 to March 2016. She joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1989 and has served in various capacities, including as the head of Policy and Planning Division, as Chief for Europe, Americas, and Africa Division in the Department of Bilateral Affairs, Assistant Director, Bilateral Division, Attaché, Bilateral and Multilateral Division, and Trainee Officer in the Conference Division. She has also served at the Permanent Mission of Bhutan to the UN in Geneva and the Royal Bhutanese Embassy in Dhaka. Ambassador Pema served on deputation as the Managing Director of the Bhutan Broadcasting Service Corporation, Thimphu, from 2007 to 2011. And our last but not the least, our next panelist is Director General Doji Dadul. Doji Dadul is the Director General of the Tourism Council of Bhutan since the beginning of 2019. Prior to this, he served as the Governor of Kasa District for almost 4 years. He completed a Master's of Science from the University of Reading, United Kingdom, and studied at the Peradeniya University in Sri Lanka for his graduate studies in Bachelor of Science, Agriculture. He served as the founding director of the Department of Agriculture, Marketing and Cooperatives, and as the first registrar of cooperatives of Bhutan. He is also a writer and has published articles in Council and research papers. He has also authored Excavatis Awakenings, a novel that presents a uniquely different take on life in Bhutan, moving beyond the cliched descriptions and traditional tales to lift the veil of misty romanticism and over a glimpse into the stark realities of its society. DG Doji Dadul is also a Desub, which means Guardian of Peace, since 2015. So with these introductions, I would now like to welcome everyone once again, and as per our program, hand over the floor to Professor Nadir Tafasoli to begin your 10-minute presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to those of you who are in Europe, for example. It's a real pleasure to be part of this panel. And what I'd like to do is spend the next 10 minutes or so just introducing the basic concepts of branding, the way I would teach my MBA students, so that we can have a more informed dialogue and use the right vocabulary, and you can understand what I mean when I use certain terms. So if you think about brands and branding, those are actually two very different things. So let me introduce what I mean by brands first. In my class, we talk about brand identity and brand image. Those are two aspects of the brand. We then think about, well, who is this relevant to? Why should we care about brands? Who cares about brands? We already talked about tourists, for example, but it could be business people. It could be your native population as well. And then branding is really about creating brands. We talked about transformation, for example, based on the happiness index. And there are certain moments that matter in terms of sort of creating the brand for our consumers. So let's walk through these one by one. So I won't do this with you because you don't have the ability to talk back to me, but in class, I typically put up a word, this word, safe. I also used a specific kind of font and color, and I asked students which brand comes to mind. Now, maybe for some of you, the brand Volvo comes to mind. This comes to mind for many, many people around the world. And most continents, I've used this example inside people's heads when they see this brand identity, which could be the trademark, for example, the logo, the font, the colors. As attached to that in the consumer's minds is the concept of safe. And Volvo, in a sense, owns this term safe, at least amongst car manufacturers and truck manufacturers. So that's the brand image. Those are the kind of associations, or one of the associations people have in their minds around Volvo. Okay, and that's the fundamental aspect of a brand, the identity and the image. And that's how the ISO defines brands as well. So we've got brand identity. So those are marketing related intangibles, right? This could be names, logos, designs, something that identifies who you are, meaning what the product is, what the company is, and in your case, what the country is. So think about Bhutan, your flag, for example, maybe other symbols, some temples that are associated with your country. And in consumers' minds, there's some images, associations that come to mind. And those associations are valued or not valued, and they drive economic benefits. So, for example, do people even know the identity? Do they know what Bhutan is? Do they know it's a country? Do they know where it is? And what comes to mind, and how does it affect their behavior? Now, of course, if you say Volvo rather than safe, people also think other things. A lot of people think of Volvos as a bit of a boring car. Maybe safe is not sexy, safe is a bit boring, and that's okay. But of course, Volvo is trying to be less boring with their designs over time. They might also think of Sweden, even though Volvo cars were sold to a Chinese manufacturer, Geely, in 2018. So there are certain country associations that come to mind, and they also affect consumer behavior because where something is made in, where it comes from, has a certain effect on the trust that consumers have, certain quality perceptions. And again, those associations will drive consumer behavior, which is what we care about as business people. So brand identity and brand image, we can think of Volvo as the identity, safe as part of the image. And then, well, who cares about this? Who is this relevant to at the end of the day? Here's a quote. This is from an interview with the CEO of the United States, Volvo Cars, in 2018. And Volvo was seen itself as more of a niche brand. And they talk about stead, sort of boring college professors or safety-obsessed parents. who cared about the brand. So those are the target customers. They end up buying the brand. But of course, Volvo wants to appeal to other audiences. So they invested a lot of effort into attracting younger buyers. And here's a quote from the CEO. Normally, Volvo customers are a little older. And he talks about we're starting to attract customers that are less than 40 years old, right? So, and that has a big impact on the company, of course, and their sales, the type of customers they attract. So even if you're thinking about tourism in Bhutan, there's many audiences. There's different types of tourists. They have different interests. They have a different ability to spend. And so it's not just one audience you're speaking to, and you get to influence who you want to speak to and who you want to attract. So if we think about stakeholder relevance and brand returns, just to give you an idea, and this relates to some of my research, we tend to think of customers, right? If you have a strong brand that's known to a lot of people, that has positive associations, more people might buy. They might be willing to pay more. It's less costly to attract them to our brand or to have them buy again. But also the brand affects your collaborators. You might have better terms with your suppliers. Retailers might be more likely to carry you. Others might be willing to partner with you. So maybe you collaborate with them on a different kind of brand, if you will. And you might be able to get some license fees. So for example, Apple, when they collaborate with telecommunications companies, they get very, very good terms because they have a strong brand. Your employees, if you're a top employer, you're known to be a good employer, you attract better people, and you don't have to bribe them to work for you. So your compensation costs might be lower, and these better people might also be more productive. So again, that has economic benefits. And of course, financing. You can think of banks who lend you money. You can think of investors who invest in your company. We know that strong brands have a lower cost of capital. For example, right now, the global markets are incredibly volatile, but strong brands are less volatile in terms of their stock price, which means they have a lower risk, which means they get better terms and a higher stock price because they're less risky. Regulators care a lot about the brand value. If you have a good perception, I'll give you one example, your patents might be locally protected more if you have a strong brand. And finally, of course, the media and the public, because the whole narrative, the conversation about the brand affects everyone. So lots of different people who a brand is relevant to. And just if you think about Bhutan, let's think about Happily Made in Bhutan. This was some work by Future Brand, right? You might think of the buyers of any products that you export. Likewise, companies might invest in Bhutan. For example, some of the hotel chains that invest in Bhutan, but also your own people, whether they want to, how they as citizens feel about the country, and or tourists, of course. And these are very, very different associations that matter to these different people. So we have to be very clear what our conversation is with each audience. And of course, also, there are different moments that matter. So if I'm a tourist, right, getting my visa, arriving in the country, where I stay, the tour guides I have, these are all different touch points, which are very different than if I'm buying a product that is made in Bhutan, for example. Okay, so your branding, the actions you take have to be very different depending on what the purpose is of the branding exercise. Now for Volvo, many of you will have seen Volvo ads, right? Advertising is one way to create those perceptions, those associations in consumers' minds, right? You might have had an accident, but the driver is safe, even though the car is crushed. It can carry a truck because it's got this very, very strong cage that protects the drivers when the car rolls over. But it's really their heritage. So even the idea of coming from Sweden, this is on their website, I went there yesterday, they created this brand in 1927 because of the Swedish roads. Icy roads in the winter, it's very dark. They're very big animals like elks that could try to say hello to you as you're driving on the street, or deer. So the cars had to be super safe. So coming from Sweden lends that safety aspect to the car. So they keep on talking about Sweden rather than China, for example, when it comes to their brand heritage. the whole purpose of the company. In the 1930s, Volvo named human beings as the most important part of the car. And even in 2020, when they reiterated their purpose, they say we're driven by saving lives. So it's really saying we're always going to care about safety. It's the number one priority. One of their three values is safety, the number one value, right? The other one is quality, and the other one is the environment. And then even if you look for a job, if you go to the career website and here's a lawyer, they're trying to hire commercial legal counsel, they talk about safety and join our company in order to be more safe, to save more lives. And then they have lots of innovations over time. And I'll just focus on the first and the last. These are all listed on their website. The 3-point safety seatbelt, they gave it away to all other car manufacturers. They didn't try to license it and make money because they believe in safety. So that action is part of their branding, how they behave versus others. And the last one recently, which caused a lot of news, the new cars, even though they can drive much faster, they put a limit on the car. It cannot drive above a certain speed. And some people got annoyed by this. They said, oh, what if I want to drive faster? Who are you to tell me how to drive? And they said, look, nobody is forcing you to buy a Volvo. You can buy another car if you drive faster, but we want drivers who care about safety. So even the selection of their customer is driven by their brand. Okay, they might also develop paint, for example, so that the bicyclists are safe on the road, because safety is not just for the people inside the car, but also outside the car. So if you think about these three things, right, what is the brand identity? What is the image? Who should care about it? And how do we go about branding? A nation is not a brand. But many of the same dynamics and the principles that I just talked about, the psychology behind branding, identity benefits, the ability to manage certain aspects of how your country is run, how you treat your visitors and investors, they also affect brands and branding. And I wrote up a little piece when it came to Brexit, because that was a real core moment in the national identity of the UK. And I felt it was a real branding exercise when the whole world was looking at the UK. And of course, Her Majesty just passed away, and she was very much associated with the UK for 70 years as our Queen. And of course, that has an immense perceptual aspects to the country brand as well. So I'll just end with this as part of the seminar, and I'll stop sharing here, but and I'll hear from the other panelists and then engage in a dialogue with you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for that interesting presentation. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions later. For now, we will now go over to Mr. Ko Bak Song for his intervention. Ko.
Right. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to join in this discussion. In the few minutes that I have, I'm going to address three questions. The first one is what is country branding? The second is what does it entail? And the third is why is it important? On the first question, what is country branding? I think most people already have a broad understanding of commercial branding, which and Professor Tavastoli has just given us an even more comprehensive and complete a framework and a vocabulary to think about those ideas around commercial branding. The key difference between country branding and commercial branding is that for a country, it can be treated as a brand, and it can in a much more holistic way, because we are actually dealing with the perceptions of that country by anyone and everyone else around the world, and that is how wide the scope is. Now, when you're dealing with something so broad. And it's useful to think more closely at how is it different from commercial or corporate branding. And another aspect of this holistic dimension of country branding is that anything and almost everything could be relevant, and that's the external dimension. And internally, it also means that every citizen can have some contribution and should think about the possibility of contributing to adding to the country brand. What does country branding entail? It's normally applied to three main areas. The first is tourism, the second is trade and investment, and the third is immigration. And there is the external dimension of country branding is what people are more familiar with, but the internal dimension is just as important, and many countries neglect this aspect. And this also brings us to the difference between branding and brand building. Now, branding a country would include aspects which people are familiar with. For example, placing an advertisement in a foreign media, a magazine or other media platform to advertise tourism. That's something people are familiar with. But less obvious would be things that a country does internally in communicating with its own citizens and residents, which also contribute to this consciousness of what the country brand is. Let me cite a specific example taken from Singapore. 3 years ago, there was a national effort called to commemorate the year which we call the Singapore Bicentennial, 2019, commemorating the 200th anniversary of the arrival of the British and the beginnings of Singapore becoming a British a colony. But that whole year was broadened to a year of reflecting on Singapore's much longer history, dating back 700 years from 2019 into its earlier history in Southeast Asia. And as part of that process, there was a major exhibition, public exhibition, which many citizens visited. There were many other activities. Organizations were encouraged to also remember their own organizational history. But one of the takeaways from that whole year of activities, from the perspective of country branding, is the distillation down to three brand attributes of Singapore, three characteristics of Singapore. And these three brand attributes were openness, self-determination, and multiculturalism. Openness referring to the fact that Singapore, throughout its history, has always been a free port, a trading hub, and a keynote attracting trade in products and services, and also the free flow of people through the centuries. And self-determination is about the country's independent history of focusing on determining its own future and destiny. And multiculturalism is about Singapore's many of the unique features of Singapore's multiracial makeup of its population, and also its the extent to which it welcomes people from other countries. There are huge communities of people from other countries which are part of the resident population. So this kind of communication is not is quite unlike the kind of communication that would be done to the benefit of a corporate brand. But it is communication and the building of a consensus around key ideas, the country brand attributes, and also the buy-in into key ideas about what the country stands for, its character, and even its personality. Now why is country branding important? It's important because of the power of a brand. I think very well illustrated by Bhutan itself. If you just speak of when anyone speaks of happiness, they think of Bhutan, and then that's how powerful the country brand of Bhutan is. Its country branding is also important because of that it is essential to growth. Now, if a country were just happy with its status quo and to just carry on as it is, then there would be much less need for country branding. But if there's any desire at all to boost tourism, trade, investment, and for some countries, much less so for Bhutan, to boost immigration, then clearly effort must be put into building that brand externally and internally to also build the brand in the hearts and minds of citizens, so that they would also join in that effort and contribute to the building of the brand internationally. There are also, if you like, side benefits of focusing on country branding. I think for the civil service, it is, if you like, a great way to break the silo mentality, because it's quite typical in any organization, including the public service, for members of an organization to think primarily of their own organization and its key performance indicators. So getting everyone to have a deeper understanding of what country branding is and what it entails, and how they could possibly contribute to it individually, then that would be, to me, I think, a great way to bring everyone together. I think Professor Tavasoli told us that the framework of branding that he presented is presented mostly to MBA students. I think country branding should be presented to MPA students or MPP students, students of public policy. But I find it somewhat curious that very few public policy schools around the world deal with this subject of country branding to any appreciable degree, and I think that it is this to me, this deficit should be narrowed. And finally, for what is the benefit, the side benefit, if you like, for citizens, I think it would also, helping citizens to have a fuller understanding of country branding, what it is, what it entails, and why it's important, would also deepen their own sense of belonging and identity to their country. And it would also inspire more of them to individually contribute to the building of the country brand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ko. Some very useful insights there. I know you can actually talk a lot, especially because you have written that very popular book on brand Singapore. I'm sure we will get to talk more about more specific things later. For now, I will hand over the floor to Ambassador Pema Chodin to share her thoughts, particularly in terms of Bhutan's experience in public diplomacy, in international relations, as a means or as tools to foster our country image and also manage our country image better. So, Ambassador, you have the floor now. You're muted, Melam.
Thank you and Khusus Zongpo to everybody Right off, I must offer apologies. We started a few minutes late because I had some problem logging in to this very interesting policy seminar. And this has resulted in me sitting with my colleague, the Director General of the Tourism Council of Bhutan. It's a very interesting situation because right now, Bhutan, we happen to be at a very important time in our history when transformation, radical change is taking place. And I find that at this moment, I have failed in one respect, which is that I have not been IT savvy enough to log into my link sent by RIGSS. But, and we had Mr. Ko Baksang talking about the silos. We have broken down the silos between the Tourism Council and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've actually been working very closely towards the reopening of Bhutan to tourism. When I was told by our moderator, director of RIGSS, that we were going to have this policy seminar, I was very excited. I was very excited to listen to Professor Tavasoli and to Mr. Ko Baksang. I was a little less excited when I was told I was going to be a panelist. And I had to offer up a Latin prayer that a friend of mine taught me recently. It goes something like, Ego sum dignas, which means, Lord, I am not worthy. So I do not know much about branding, apart from the little that I have done with my colleague from the Tourism Council in recent months. I've taken a lot of notes from our two previous panelists. I must say, Professor Tavasoli, the example you gave struck a note with me because I think my family is the only one that drives a Volvo in Bhutan. I think there was one more Volvo in the old days. In all the history of Bhutan, I recall 3 Volvos, all people from the foreign ministry. But thank you for this wonderful lesson in brands and in branding. I have put together some random thoughts, and I probably don't have it all correct. I just wanted to think about how Bhutan has been, let's say, branded by others and how we have been branded thanks to our own actions over the years. And I was looking at how we were looked at in history beyond our immediate neighborhood. Now, what little I know of branding, I feel doesn't work with your immediate neighbors because they know you too well. We've warred with them, we've sparred with them, we've lost, we've won, and we know each other pretty well. So I'm looking at what people from even further off had to say about Bhutan. And, when you look up Bhutan, one of the very earliest reports on Bhutan written by Westerners was by the Portuguese Jesuits. We had 2 Jesuits who arrived in Bhutan at a very historic time when our great Shabdung Nawang Namgyal was alive. And it's very interesting because this was really the first Western account of Bhutan and gave the first description of about Bhutan. It describes Paro Valley very well and their experience with the Shabdung himself. And he emerges as a very strong leader, both spiritual and temporal, a very caring, saintly, highly literate and gifted artist who was very inspired by a painting by Raphael and tried to paint it himself. I don't know where it is now, that painting, but he also came across as very tolerant. And these were Jesuits who were actually here to convert people to Christianity. And they believed that perhaps Bhutanese had been Christians because we have the same elaborate rituals as the Jesuits. So they hoped to convert or reconvert Bhutanese back to tourism. So that was a very interesting account. And the Shabdung was very tolerant, offered them people they could teach Christianity to, and also offered to build a church and build a house for them in Bhutan. Subsequent visits by outsiders was mostly by the British, because they were next door in India. We had British officers who traveled to Bhutan or who were stationed in India. And it's very interesting, because depending on their own colonial imperial imperatives, Bhutan was described, and this is in the work of a friendly scholar, we were described as supremely charming or barbarically uncivilized, given which point of time you were, your relation stood at. And even as recently as the late 1920s, we had a very interesting, description of Bhutan. I want to read it out. Some of you all might have heard it at another seminar by the Center for Bhutan Studies recently. I discovered it a few years ago. So this was published in the Sikkim Gazetteer because the British political officer in Sikkim kept an eye on Bhutan. And what they say is about Bhutan, and this is branding, we were branded by them. No one wishes to explore that tangle of jungle-clad and fever-stricken hills, infested with leeches and the bipsa fly, and offering no advantages to the most enterprising pioneer. Adventure looks beyond Bhutan. Science passes it by as a region not sufficiently characteristic to mention special consideration. So that was the brand that the British stuck on us as late as the 1920s. And this was after our first king, before he became king, had helped them actually, in reaching out to our neighbors in the north. So we were branded in that way. Now, if you fast forward to, let's say, modern socioeconomic development in the 1970s, when we set up our government system, we set up a foreign service. I think a pivotal moment for us was our membership of the UN. So that's where I decided to start. The UN, as everybody knows, has 193 member states. I looked at the size of the countries who are members of the UN, looking at population. So we looked at the UNFPA population dashboard, and Bhutan, out of 193, we stand 159th in terms of population. There are only 34 countries in the world that have smaller populations than us, and many of them are micro island states. The only neighbor in our region that is smaller than us is the Maldives, which is 166 in terms of population. The neighbor that we are most often compared to, Nepal, is 49th in the world in terms of population. 49th, and Bhutan is 159th. When we look at diplomatic relations, Bhutan, we have diplomatic relations with 54 out of the 193 member states of the UN. In terms of diplomatic missions, Bhutan has 10. The Maldives, which is smaller than us, has 18. And Nepal, which is a giant compared to us, which nobody realizes beyond our neighborhood, has 35 diplomatic missions abroad. So by all measures, Bhutan is an extremely small player at the international level with a very limited outreach. And this is reflected in all the development narrative about Bhutan, which came with socioeconomic development, which we have embraced wholeheartedly, where we are always described as this very small nation that is sandwiched between, well, the two largest countries in the world. And yet, and reference has been made by Mr. Koh, by any measure, Bhutan, I think, continues to punch above its weight. And today we are a brand Bhutan. And in my own experience, this is viewed with envy by diplomats and by others alike. And we wonder, how did we get there? How did we reach this place where we are a brand and we are a positive story? And I can only attribute it to the very visionary leadership that we have in Bhutan. And we have talked about our policy of G&H, which is development with values, but I think we have had leadership with values who have shown compassion, integrity, and justice, and who have given us very pioneering and visionary policies. We've already talked about happiness, cross-national happiness. Environment, Bhutan is seen as the environmental champion of the world. We are the only country that is not just carbon, we are carbon negative. And I think we invented that term too. And then we are known for good governance. And I think our leadership, the kind of leadership that we have enjoyed, has actually been reinforced during the pandemic. This very difficult, almost 3 years that we have gone through, Bhutan has come through relatively well, and this is thanks to our leadership. So we have gone from being very little known, apart from being seen as very far away and exotic, to where we are today. There's a largely positive narrative about Bhutan, and there is always positive interest in Bhutan. And this gives us outreach and influence much beyond the limitations of our limited formal diplomatic relations. And as a diplomat, I can only say that as a Bhutanese diplomat, I think I have ridden on the shoulder of the greats of our great leadership. And in terms of branding, I think we've had this discussion. Maybe I'm stealing some points from our Director General. I think it is not what you promise, but what you deliver. And I think in terms of what we have earned in recent years, in terms of branding, is what we have delivered through environment, through gross national happiness, development with values, and through good governance. Lasso, I've overrun my time a little bit. Thank you, La.
Thank you, Honorable Secretary, for actually bringing out some important points here, and also giving a historical perspective, particularly for the benefit of our foreign panelists on, in a way, how Bhutan's foreign policy itself evolved over the decades and centuries, in fact. Also bringing about the relevance of leadership to branding. So very useful points. So we will talk more about it as we go along. Right now, I want to go to Director General Doji Dadru for his introductory remarks, particularly in terms of branding from the tourism industry perspective. Destination branding is quite commonly known around the world. It's one field where countries invest heavily. So to share Bhutan's experience in terms of promotion of tourism, or Bhutan's experience in destination branding and the way forward. So, sir, floor is yours.
Plus, Kuzuz Angola, and thank you very much, Director RIGSS and the moderator for this discussion. Such a timely discussion that you have convened. And why I'm saying this is as my earlier speaker from Bhutan has already informed that we are undergoing a big transformation in the country. And as a part of a transformation, we are also presently working towards a deadline of 23rd September, wherein we will be launching a new brand Bhutan. So we are working on this. So therefore, it is indeed such a timely discussion that is taking place here. And I, as a personally, am very new to this concept of a brand, and also to be part of this panelist with such a eminent and expert, especially Dr. Tagusili and Mr. Kovaksang, such a prominent figure in this particular area, and of course, our Foreign Secretary also with such a vast experience in diplomacy. So I feel such privilege and honor to be participating in this. And in my short introduction, I think I would just like to take this opportunity to briefly talk about the branding works in tourism in the past, and as I said, a sneak review to the new brand Bhutan, which will be launched on 22nd September 2022 as a part of the formal reopening of tourism on 23rd September, which is just about 9 days, I think, from today. And as Director Moderator has stated in his introduction, branding could be fairly new in Bhutan. I mean, you can say that, but I would say qualify by saying branding in the formal sense may be fairly new in Bhutan. And as highlighted by Foreign Secretary earlier, in all practical senses, I mean, branding was happening in our country, and in fact, quite successfully, I would say. Otherwise, I mean, how can we explain the positive global image that our country enjoys today? I believe today Bhutan is well known globally. Bhutan is respected and appreciated for the great leadership in our monarchs, the purity of the environment, the sincere spiritualism in our daily life, as a birthplace of the gross national happiness, which Mr. Kovaksang has also touched on, which is an alternate approach to development. And of course, the Bhutanese people and the unique democracy, a very recent development in the country. And Bhutan as the mystical and even dubbed as the last Shangri-La. And of course, coming to tourism that promotes high value, low volume. So these are all important ingredients of the brand Bhutan as of today, and which are as a result of branding, I would say. And in tourism specifically, so far we had 2 brand logos actually, and the tagline. And the present one with the blue poppy flower and the tagline, "Happiness is a place," was actually adopted only in 2010. And by 2019, this destination, so-called destination brand, was already becoming a nation's brand. Actually, it was developed as a destination brand, but slowly it was already becoming as a nation brand. And it started to, we started to face the challenge of not being able to deliver the brand promise, visualized through the tagline, "Happiness is a place," and which also started to have offshoots such as Bhutan as the happiest country, Bhutanese as the happiest people, and which we all know is too good to be true. So therefore, brand Bhutan was already becoming unauthentic. And that is a big problem, as nothing can be more important than authenticity when it comes to brand. So fortunately, our leadership saw the silver lining in the otherwise the disastrous COVID-19 pandemic, and most timely started the historic and the transformative journey of our nation building with a renewed and enhanced goal. And tourism, being an important player, joined the nation's transformation journey by itself getting transformed. And one important project is as I shared earlier, is the rebranding of the destination. And this rebranding project started as a rebranding of the destination brand, which we wanted to change the destination brand, which is blue poppy flower with the "Happiness is a place." However, at the very early stages of the rebranding exercise, when we were actually working on the branding principles, we realized that we were actually working on developing a new brand for the nation. So in a way, we have come a full circle in our branding story. We started with the nation brand. In between, we got carried away with the destination brand. And now, presently, we are working towards going back to the nation brand. So therefore, as of today, we are seeing Bhutan, we are not pursuing a separate destination brand, but rather a destination brand that is subsumed in the nation brand. So in other words, the new brand Bhutan can be and will be used by any sector or stream, such as for tourism promotion. And this new brand Bhutan is not only about nation branding. In our context, more importantly, in today, when you're talking about the transformation of our nation, it is about the nation building. And we very much believe that this new brand Bhutan will reflect the visions and aspirations of the transformed Bhutan and also transformed tourism. And specifically in tourism, we are trying to rebrand by saying a tourism that is beyond revenue and receipts, a tourism that is knowledge-based and a professional, a tourism that is reinforced high values and low volume policy to develop Bhutan into an exclusive place and a space for the conscious traveler. And the tourism is like any natural resources, a strategic valuable asset of the country for the citizens of today and tomorrow. And the new brand Bhutan will support the nation building with its guiding principles, based on which a new brand promise has been defined. And the brand promise will be communicated through its brand logo, a new brand logo and a new tagline, and of course, supported by brand manifestos. And the brand promise will be delivered in the context of the brand values. So the new brand Bhutan will be holistic, it will be realistic and authentic, which will inspire both the visitors and the locals alike. The present brand, Happiness is the Place, it was more of a targeting the visitors. It was not really owned and so relevant to the national. But now the new brand Bhutan is going to be equally relevant to Bhutanese and to the visitors. So if I may express that the new brand Bhutan could also, in a way, depict the nation's new conscience, the nation's new aspiration, and the nation's new promise, triggered by the transformation that is going on. Therefore, I like to believe the new nation's brand will be real, will be reliable, will be relevant and relatable to everyone, including visitors and locals. Is all about ownership when you're talking about brand and also authenticity. So thank you for now.
Thank you, DG sir. Apparently, we can make out that you're not able to reveal much about what's coming on the 22nd. But nonetheless, we are really happy and excitedly looking forward to the new brand Bhutan concept, purpose, etc. on 22nd. So firstly, we won't really put much pressure on you to reveal more about that. Secondly, one thing that you brought out that was interesting is also the fact that while in a very formal way, we have not discussed branding, but I fully agree that strategies were there in some sense, actually, in a way to promote brand Bhutan from those days during Shabdung's time, as Secretary mentioned earlier, and whether it's at that product service level or more importantly at country level, tourism level, there were efforts to actually create that perception about our country in a way, in some unstructured form. But in a formal sense, of course, as I also mentioned earlier, this is a fairly new concept to us. And in the first place, that is why we thought it is a good opportune time now to actually have this introductory seminar on branding. So thank you to all the esteemed panelists. We will have a short break, health break, since it's been an hour, to be fair to our panelists and audience. And we will come back when we will have more discussions, as well as questions from the audience. For the audience, you may send in your questions through Slido. The Slido code is being now shared. Event code is 420-4280. So please feel free to ask your questions through this link. We will be right back after a short 5-minute health break. Thank you and see you soon. We will, of course, take questions from the audience as well. Already a lot of questions have come on Slido. But before we go to the audience, let me start with a question each to all our speakers. I will start with Professor Tabasoli. So the way we organized today's seminar, basically branding is something not just limited to products and services, as most of us understand, but there is a way to look at branding in a more holistic manner, and particularly talking about nation branding. There are many aspects to look at. There are many things within a country that matters, including, of course, products and services. And particularly as a marketing professor, I would like to ask Professor one question. So we have all said about how limited we know about branding in Bhutan, and in a way, looking at the locally manufactured products in the country, we have many products locally manufactured, but I think we know the product more by the product than by the brand. And given the importance of having good brands, popular brands, respected brands in a country, which of course adds to the overall nation brand, and the limited understanding of the concept of branding, particularly amongst the manufacturers, for example, in our country. Maybe it has got to do with the nature of our economy, which is mostly import-driven, or maybe it's got to do with our small size or the small size of our market. So as I mentioned earlier, we know products more by product itself than by the brand. So given such a scenario, Professor, where do we really start? Particularly in terms of building good brands for our locally manufactured products and indigenous services or whatever we have inside the country to offer. So where do we start, Professor?
Yeah, so that's a very broad question. So we talked about how, Volvo could decide between saying, well, now a Chinese company or where we have a Swedish heritage, right? These are very important decisions Volvo as a manufacturer has to make, because it influences the way the consumers, their partners, their employees think about the company and the pride they might have. So if you're producing in China, being a Chinese company might be more beneficial because the employees will be prouder, you attract better people, they're more productive, there's less absenteeism, those kind of measures as well. So it's a complicated question for just one manufacturer, because of course Volvo is a car manufacturer. But if you think of IKEA, which is also Swedish, it's a furniture manufacturer. So what does Swedish mean for a car that can drive on icy roads and there's animals in the way in the dark winter, versus what does it mean for a furniture manufacturer, or maybe a food that comes from Sweden? So certain brands, if you think of France as a brand, people think of the hedonic, the luxury products, the taste of the products. If they think of made in Germany, they think of the engineering, the quality, the physical quality of the products. So every country has associations which you, as a manufacturer, don't get to influence. By the same token, if you're a Japanese car manufacturer and they have Sony has a huge issue with let's say their quality, it's going to influence the perceptions of customers about my individual brand. So it's a complicated web of associations that people have. And as Bhutan, you want to ask yourself the question as an exporter, what is your main export? Is it tourism? Is it a certain food? I mean, most people wouldn't know that food from Bhutan is very spicy, for example. So could it be spices? Is it the craftsmanship of the local people? And you sort of build it layer upon layer there. And consumers do not have a complex kind of sort of web of associations they can easily draw on. So in some sense, you have to choose what you emphasize if you're going to do it from a government, a country perspective, because no consumer is going to walk around the world and be clear about the foods from Bhutan, the crafts from Bhutan, the electronics from Bhutan. It's too much. So you kind of have to take a stand because consumers are going to take a stand as well. So that's what I would say. And the more you can align it, even with tourism, so happiness, I saw the label, you saw the label produced, by happy people. I think that has a lot to do, with the willingness of customers to purchase the product. So alignment around one central concept, which then is going to be fairly abstract rather than specific. I think that's the way to think about it from a country perspective.
Thank you, Professor. Ko, I have one question for you, particularly drawing from your Brand Singapore book. You mentioned about the importance of building the competitive advantage on top of the comparative advantage that a certain country has. Can you tell us more about this with perhaps specific examples from Singapore that Bhutan could learn from? What do we mean by competitive advantage, and how do we really build that competitive advantage that will help us build a strong country brand?
Right. I think I would like to talk about the aspect of the people of Singapore and how they figure in the current effort to build brand Singapore. And I will make reference to the current country brand, which is used most specifically for tourism and investment promotion. And it has the tagline, "Passion Made Possible." The idea is that Singapore is a place that attracts people from all over the world and provides a conducive environment which is constantly reinvented and improved to enable each of them to realize their passions, whether they aspire to be a celebrity chef, an entrepreneur, or some other, whether they are a musician or artist or whatever their talent is. Singapore is a place where they could come to realize their passions, and that applies equally to citizens, residents, as well as anyone in the world who is thinking of relocating to another place to realize their dream, to build their talent. So this is if you like, a comparative advantage for Singapore because of certain realities of its economic structure, and also its social and political and even geographic history, and also its geographical destiny. Because of it, Singapore is a small island in the heart of Southeast Asia. It's always been on the world's trade routes. It was on this the old Silk Road between Asia and Europe. So it has always drawn people from all over the world, and it continues to do so because of the current policies of the current government, which is something that the citizenry buys into, is fully participating in that effort to welcome people from all over the world, even if it means in many cases direct competition with their own livelihoods. This is something that should come in, which sets Singapore apart from many other countries, and it's something that has grown in uniqueness, if you like, if that were possible, because of the way that the world has changed in the last few years and even decades. The move towards de-globalization, countries retreating from the moving towards a more and more open, multilateral global trading system, and in some cases, countries trying to be as self-sufficient as possible, or relying on a smaller geography for their economic growth, the immediate hinterland, their own region, rather than opening up to the rest of the world. So in that sense, by building on this aspect, it illustrates what your question was pointing to, this building on a comparative advantage to achieve a competitive advantage, and especially at this particular time, as the whole world is trying to move out of this COVID-19 situation and opening up their societies and their economies. This becomes even more important, and it also connects with a point that Director General Dradul mentioned earlier about authenticity, because this, in my opinion, this current country brand of Singapore, with the tagline "Passion Made Possible," is the best tourism concept we've had so far, because of one key factor, because it is focused on telling the stories and showcasing the abilities of real people, the people who are presented in whether it is a conventional advertisement in the mainstream media, or on social media or some other platform, they are invariably stories of actual people telling their real life stories of their dreams and passions and achievements. So this is relying on authenticity to turn a comparative advantage into a competitive one.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on that. Now, in Singapore, you have previously worked in the EDB, the Economic Development Board, and recently I was talking to a Singaporean colleague about, usually when we talk about brands, it's either product or it's a place or a country at large, perhaps. But we do not necessarily look at, for example, public sector agencies as entities that could actually contribute so much towards building strong country brands. So, and you of course also mentioned about the role EDB played in Singapore's development, and of course in constructing that brand image that Singapore today has. So can you shed some light on how government, public sector entities like your EDB or like your HDB, my Singaporean colleague was saying, yeah, when you talk about public sector agencies in Singapore as a brand, one agency that immediately comes to mind is HDB, Housing and Development Board. So can you shed some light on how public sector agencies, maybe government ministries or departments or SOEs, how can they contribute to the larger national brand, perhaps through that inside out kind of an approach, bringing also into the importance, bringing leadership also into perspective? Well,
because a country brand is made up of all the component parts, all the component aspects of that country. Really, it's no exaggeration to say that everything is relevant. So if you look at it from the perspective of a public sector agency, everything matters. If you're a policeman helping to make Singapore one of the safest countries in the world, is one of the key components of its country brand. And that is true of everybody else, whether it is someone who makes sure that we hardly ever have an electrical blackout, or any other aspect. And just to take an example, we have a national vision to build Singapore to become a city in nature. That's the tagline. This is the third iteration of this national vision of greening Singapore. From independence in the 60s and 70s, we were a garden city. That was the tagline. That was the brand. A city with many gardens. And then and this went from 60s till about the 80s. From the 80s and the 90s, there was a shift to developing Singapore as a city in a garden. So it's flipping it around from garden city to city in a garden, because it then becomes the whole country is like a garden. It's a metaphorical in some sense, but also very, very real, because it's not just how X number of gardens that we have, where are they located, etc. But the whole country is being developed as a garden. But a garden to people from the world of horticulture and botany seems very, very man-made. It's almost artificial. So the current focus is to move towards building Singapore as a city in nature. That's the current tagline, and it is to envision it building further on the city in a garden to a city in nature, meaning all the other aspects of the natural world, some of which are well, they're aided by man, but certainly not man-made. I'll give you an interesting example. For example, the bird, the orient Oriental pied hornbill, which is black and white with a yellow beak, was thought to be extinct from Singapore, but it is now thriving in great numbers, partly because there are many more trees being planted, many more flowering plants and shrubs in every part of Singapore, every road divider, where the wild grass is being replaced with flowering plants. So that's the natural part. But the man-made part is that the officials from the National Parks Board have actually built man-made wooden nests, and they've hung them in trees around the island to allow the Oriental pied hornbill to nest in these man-made nests. The reason is because in nature, this hornbill usually builds its nest in holes in rotting or dying trees. But because the trees in Singapore are so well kept that there are hardly any rotting or dying trees, so hence the need for this man-made nest. So this is a mixture of just being a catalyst, nurturing the most conducive environment to attract migratory birds, to the additional element of the man-made interventions to enhance that process even further. And this is an example of a public sector agency that is looks at this work, certainly not as bricklaying, but building the cathedral, to use a very English expression.
Thank you, Ko. Very interesting. Foreign Secretary, a quick question to you. Earlier, you mentioned Bhutan having just a handful of missions, and also even in terms of our diplomatic relations, not as many countries as others. So apart from diplomatic relations, what are some other ways and means by which we can foster our country image or build better relations in terms of promoting ourselves as a brand to the outside world?
Yeah.
Let's thank you, La. While formal diplomatic relations are limited in number, our interaction with the rest of the world is not limited, Shunila. It has never gotten in the way of having interaction and also successful cooperation with other countries with which we don't have diplomatic relations. And now with our quarantine restrictions being lifted, I think you're starting to see a continuous inflow of official visitors. And this is a sign that even in the absence of diplomatic relations, we are still able to interact with the rest of the world. And given that we enjoy this very positive image in the world, my own experience as a diplomat has been that, and even in a place like Brussels, which is very, very busy, and this might be an interesting factoid, has the most number of ambassadors in the world, because you have ambassadors to Belgium, you have ambassadors to the EU. Sometimes you'll have 3 or 4 ambassadors to the EU from the same country. You have ambassadors to NATO. So I believe it's the largest concentration of ambassadors. So then the Bhutanese ambassador is an even smaller player than the rest. But even there, when we reach out to partners, not just in the EU with the government, but elsewhere, when you say you're from Bhutan, there's that immediate positive interest, there's that positive reaction. And of course, the story is true, you're the happiest country in the world. So then I should promote DG Tourism's job by saying, don't believe everything you see or read, come and see for yourself. But you were immediately able to get very positive reaction and attention. And if you could think of something you could do together, then the door was always open. It's surprising how many doors are open to this little kingdom of ours. And I think that all of us, of course, diplomats, but also the rest of our government agencies are able to leverage on this And the kinds of partnerships that we have, it's quite surprising. I can give an example of when we have our National Day in our embassy in Brussels. We have very few Bhutanese in Brussels, apart from the embassy staff and family. So we used to reach out to Bhutanese, especially those who are studying, both undergraduate and also master's level, many of them on EU scholarships. We would invite them to our National Day and help them to spend a couple of nights in Brussels for that. And they would be the star attraction. And we were amazed at the places that our Bhutanese were scattered across, like studying, training, from the north to the south, east to west. And these are all partnerships that we've been able to establish despite having a presence only in Brussels. So I think there are many ways, and like you said, our positive image is something that allows us to find interested partners wherever we look. And I think it is for us to take this forward. And at this moment of transformation, I think that for the Foreign Ministry especially, looking at what can we do, looking at economic opportunities. And I saw in your introduction also talking about branding and with a parallel focus on economic growth. And earlier you were discussing with Professor Tavasoli what we could do. In fact, I have a pet project. Some of my colleagues in the civil service know about it. Because Bhutan, we produce in very small quantities, but we have very particular niche products. It could be chilies from one region, cheese from another, the smoked fish from Mongdi. I think we could brand it by having geographical indications. You'll only ever find this product from this particular village in Bhutan. And then our DG will get his tourists who want to go to this region. So I think there's a lot we can do, just leveraging what we already have, and that will take us to another level. Plus, I hope I've answered your question.
Lasla, thank you so much. In fact, you raised a very important point there, which I fully agree with in terms of the opportunity for us to carry forward or leverage on the very positive image, impression, perception that we have as a country outside. So thank you. DG, there's a question on Slido, so let me skip my question and take this one from the audience to be fair to the audience. So DG Tourism, the question is, how can we as Bhutanese citizens contribute to brand Bhutan in light of the new tourism policy? What is our role?
Oh, I think that's a very, thank you so much. That's a very important question, very relevant. Now in this transform tourism, we are actually changing the perspective of the who are the primary stakeholders of tourism. Now we'll forget about the past, but if you talk of the future, then we are seeing all Bhutanese, all citizens of Bhutan are going to be the stakeholders of tourism. So therefore, every Bhutanese has a role to play, to promote, to support, to protect our tourism, and tourism as a strategic valuable asset of the country. So therefore, not only the Bhutanese as individual citizen, not only that you will contribute, not only that you will be more responsible for tourism, but at the same time you will be also desiring for the benefits that will be coming from the tourism. So just given a very practical suggestion how we can contribute to this new brand Bhutan or the transform tourism is just by taking care of your own litter and trash. And in tourism, and also is a national issue, but especially in tourism, our biggest concern is that we are not able to take care of our litters and waste and trashes. I mean, a lot of initiatives have been taking place by the government, by NEC, by Desung, by Guide Association, but campaigns take place on a day, it is clean, but then next day is back to square one. So if every individual Bhutanese take care of your own responsibility of taking care of your trash, that will be a biggest contribution to the brand Bhutan or the new transform tourism law. So likewise, I think you can take so many other initiatives. Thank you.
Could I add something to that? Because I've been so closely, having broken down the silos, working so closely with DG. I think in our
Yes.
tourism discussions, one thing that has come across is one reason why visitors come to love Bhutan is because of the people. They find that Bhutanese are very warm, very friendly. And I think we have been hearing His Majesty saying, I think if you want a brand, we want to be known as a dependable country. So I would just encourage every Bhutanese to stay that way, to be even warmer, friendlier, even more dependable. And I think brand Bhutan is made.
Yes, thank you. That's very valid point.
Yes, very well said. Thank you. Thank you. Professor, there is one question for you. Which comes first? Set practices or standards and then create the brand around that? Or brand first and work towards that?
Yeah, that's a constant tension. So clearly, I would advise companies or countries even to get your act in order first, right? Because once you brand, people pay attention. Branding comes with saying, hey, I have something to say, listen to me. And if people take a closer look and you're not able to deliver, so this comes back to the authenticity, people will, they'll turn away, they'll be disappointed, they'll be less satisfied. So clearly you want to get the house in order first. Having said that, branding also works as a catalyst. So, I don't know what the new brand for Bhutan will be, but if it's around conscious tourists, if it's about nature and preserving nature, not littering, like you might see on the slopes of Nepal, then if you don't lead the way with, your own people, that's kind of fake, right? And but if you say, look, we're telling the world this is who we are, please, so you have to nudge people. You have to get them to take care of their trash, like you just said. So the brand also acts as a catalyst. And then it becomes self-reinforcing, right? So it's a dynamic. You can think of these as two pistons. Yes, you want to be able to deliver. So you want to base your brand on something real, and you want to invest in that in the first place. But you can kind of use it to get your people to deliver even better. It can be slightly aspirational, and that's a very careful balance that you need to take.
Thank you, Professor. Just wanted to follow up with one question from my side. Particularly, one thing I liked about your 5-week Coursera course on branding is this thing about behaviors. And of course, you earlier in your slides, you mentioned about the touch points or the moments that matter. To me personally, this is not only relevant to private companies offering goods and services, but also to public sector agencies. Can you shed some more light on how the behaviors of employees or leadership is important, whether it's in companies or whether it's in organizations, institutions, irrespective?
Okay, so let me give you just 3 quick examples. So I was just in Salzburg with Red Bull. And even though it's a packaged goods company, they hire certain types of people who often come from the kind of sports and activities and cultural events that they celebrate in their activation with their customers. So even for a packaged goods company, you need the right people inside. Or at Unilever, the people who are part of the Dove brand are very different than the people who are part of the Axe and Lynx brand, right? Because the brand represents something different. So the brand shines through. On the more extreme level, if you think about a tourism brand, a country brand, the people are the ones who have the most significant touch points. They actually deliver the value to the customers. So, when I show up at the embassy to get a visa, how am I treated? Is it a happy place if I come to the Bhutanese embassy? Will it feel different, right? The same way if I go to a restaurant or hotel, will it feel different from another one? That's the comparative advantage. As I arrive in the country, how am I treated at the border, and how do I observe others being treated? Right? I might be a first-class passenger, but how are the immigrants being treated at the border? So I'm talking from experience here. How are the taxi drivers? It's one of your first and last touch points when you come into a country. So Glasgow famously rebranded itself by being, a great place to work and visit by working with the taxi drivers to improve their appearance, the way they talk to customers, and so forth. So these are all really important touch points, and any brand has many of these touch points. And that gets back to the earlier question with should you first brand or first deliver? The branding works to know that everybody knows what you're working towards. So this is really aligning, what I call aligning business, brand, and behavior. So the brand has this ability inside the company to actually articulate your strategy so that everybody knows between the many things they could do, well, try to work in this direction. So brand has a very important, executional aspect to strategy because it helps people inside know what is our strategy, what are we trying to create in the minds of our customers so that they can collectively achieve this.
Thank you, Professor. Ko, there is one question from Justin Sim, who I know is Singaporean. The question is, while branding is the message, I'm sure the reach and volume matters too. How do we craft a message with purpose, with the right extent on country branding? Is that question clear, Ko?
I think so. I'll attempt to address it. I think well, speaking from Singapore's experience, much of the country branding in Singapore is actually takes place on a decentralized mode. Meaning the agency that looks after trade does its thing, the one that looks after foreign investment, the one seeking to bring in talented people in various fields, whether it's technology, healthcare, entrepreneurship generally, and so on. But one thing they have in common is that they are very targeted in their communication, which I think is what this question is getting at. The mode that is used is direct marketing. For example, the Economic Development Board, where I used to work, is extremely targeted in its communication. It does sometimes place sometimes in the past. I'm not sure the extent to which it does now, but I'm sure it still happens, which is, for example, placing an ad in the Financial Times or the Economist magazine or something like that, very in the public domain and very obvious. But much of the communication is unlike that, and almost the opposite. It comes in by way of an official from the EDB sitting down with a CEO or the chairman or the CTO of that company to speak to them about opportunities for things that they could do in or with Singapore. So it's that direct. It's face to face. And some of the advertising is done in trade publications, which the man in the street would never see. So much of the marketing or the communication happens at that level.
Thank you. There's one question here which I should ask to our Bhutanese panelists. Either of you can answer this. The only uniqueness I see in our country is being carbon negative. I don't know whether you would agree with that or not, but that's what the question says. The only uniqueness I see in our country is being carbon negative. Our country brand should revolve around it, which is authentic. Is being carbon negative the only USP that Bhutan has, or do we have more?
Secretary.
I'll try. Definitely, we are the only carbon negative country in the world. There are others who, I think, a couple of others who are carbon neutral. So definitely, yeah, that makes us very, very unique from the rest. But I think we're also different. Firstly, every country country is different. Let's put it that way. Let's recognize that every country is different from others. But Bhutan, I think for visitors and, when we meet counterparts abroad, it is, like I said, because it has this brand, it is seen as very, very unique. And I think one of the defining features of this uniqueness is the leadership, which has given us these very special qualities that are actually acknowledged by the rest of the world. So I would not reduce, definitely, in fact, I must say this is a little undiplomatic. I think our carbon negative status has not done enough for us. We are on the front lines of climate change, but as a very small country with a very small service, I think we struggle to access multilateral climate funds. I hope there are some people from that listening in. So it is not doing enough for us. We definitely need to do more there. But I think there are many ways we're different. And I can tell you how I was different. In Europe, you'd be invited to state events and you'd be told dress code, dark suit. And I would turn up in my very colorful kira and tell them, excuse me, this is my dark suit. Instantly recognizable. So we are definitely unique there. But I think there are many different ways of being unique. And I think Bhutan has actually benefited from all of this uniqueness. And I think as Bhutanese, we should work together to leverage all that is unique in Bhutan, not just for the purpose of promoting tourism, but for nation building, I do.
No,
DG.
Yeah, any thoughts, La?
maybe later on, I think maybe.
Yes.
Can I add to that point? Because I think it's an interesting point. Because when I work with brands, we can also think, do we push a specific attribute of the product or something bigger? So if you think of a luxury brand like Louis Vuitton, the biggest luxury brand in the world, and if Bhutan wants to be more exclusive, for example, think about it. They made their name on their waterproof canvas. So they could have flat trunks. They're easier to transport some 100+ years ago. But their brand is not around waterproof luggage. It was the basis, at the core of the identity of it. And now they're much more about travel, exploration, people who want to see the world. So their brand is much more about this brand archetype of the explorer, the interested person, the cultured person in the world. Red Bull is very much about energy drinks. They created the category. It's about caffeine in some sense. But that's not what they sell. They sell this idea that Red Bull gives you wings, which is actually quite similar to Singapore's nation branding, right? You can fulfill your dreams. Red Bull also allows people to sort of push the boundaries of what's possible. So when you do decide on some of these specific attributes, think about how they can form the basis of a broader positioning that's maybe more abstract, more desirable, more inspirational. And finally, I'd like to say, being carbon neutral is tricky when you come to tourism, because you're telling me, why don't you fly with a plane from England, which is terrible for the environment, to come to our carbon neutral country. So you want to also be very, very careful how you use some of these attributes, because there can be some contradictions in the message.
Could I also add a point here? I think it'd be interesting to take a step back and see that actually what is happening here is that there are actually two schools of thought coming together. One school of thought, which appears to be the more dominant one, is this human urge to find one answer or the best answer, to distill everything down. In the case of branding, to one tagline, 3 words, 4 words that encapsulate the whole country. Look for that one unique thing. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is to look for more than one, because my leanings are with this second school of thought, which is that it would be unproductive to insist on everyone agreeing on that one idea. And that is why most branding brainstorming sessions break down, and people go break out for drinks with no agreement whatsoever. But the reality is that the world is very diverse and very fragmented. The writer Malcolm Gladwell tells this story about the search for the one pasta sauce, and for a while they tried to find that one pasta sauce that everyone would like, and eventually they gave up and realized that actually you should have a few in your product line, because that's the nature of the market. That people like a few things, not just one thing, and it's the diversity that is the way forward, rather than to try to bring everything down to one. From what I heard earlier, from what the Director General Dradru was sharing with us about the change, I suspect there's a little bit of that here, because in the past the old tagline for Bhutan, happiness is a place, came from the first school of thought, distilling everything down into one tagline, one idea, and that led to some questions or even problematic areas, as Secretary Choden alluded to, this questions of inauthenticity and so on. So I'm very eager to see what the new branding is, but I suspect it's probably influenced by the second school of thought. And if you in the professionals who work in this area, if you speak to people from an advertising agency, they are, if you like, in the process of branding, more downstream. They are the ones who would pressurize you to agree on that one tagline, whereas the people who work in branding, the more pure branding, they are much more upstream, and they might be wanting you to agree to work around, say, 3 key brand attributes rather than one single tagline.
Thank you, Ko and Professor, for sharing your insights on this question.
Can I add just one last thought,
yes,
talking about Bhutan and happiness and Bhutan and carbon negativity. In my job, I think the great difficulty I faced was you have such a good image. How do you live up to it? So again, for me, I think the branding is not what you promise, but what you deliver. And I think that is in the hands of all the Bhutanese, because we are all the stakeholders in this.
Yes.
Last, thank you. In fact, on Slido, there are so many questions about what we as individuals, as business, as civil servants, what can we do to contribute towards Brand Bhutan? So I think more or less, directly, indirectly, I think so much was said around that question. So I'm not going to bring that question. But coming back to Ko's point about bringing everything to one catchy tagline could sometimes be problematic. Our tourism DG has been a governor in one of the districts in Bhutan before, and he came up with this tagline. He was in that district called Gasa, and he came up with this initiative with this tagline, Gasa, good to great. So DG, if you could share some, of your experiences in terms of whether having a tagline works, maybe in the public sector context, maybe in running a district, maybe it worked, maybe it did not. Can you? I'm also trying to bring in this public sector aspect into this discussion on branding, because we also have, in fact, most of our audience today is our civil servants, and I, for one, definitely feel that as much as branding applies to private companies, products, Coca-Cola, Apple, Volvo, whatever we have, or to companies, I also feel that branding can apply similarly to public sector institutions and agencies. So DG, if you could share some of your experiences with your good to great GASA initiative.
Alas, thank you, Alas. Yes, I think as I was expressing earlier, I'm very new to this branding, but having said this, now looking back, that initiative was, I think, kind of a branding activity, I would say now looking back, because while my objective then was actually towards nation building, it was not really branding, but nation building. So when I started that basically I was challenging the rest 19 Zongkaks. We have 20 Zongkaks here, and GASA is one Zongkak. So I was trying to say good to great GASA, and then also the other taglines, taglines were to make GASA the #1 Zongkaks, #1 district amongst the 20 districts. So that was the challenge I was putting forth. So I was expecting other Zongkaks to challenge that, and then together we grew. So it was a nation building kind of initiative, but then it turned out to be also a GASA branding. So because of that, I think slowly GASA came into the limelight, I would say. And now at the work that we are presently doing, as Mr. Kovak Sang has actually asked me, what would be which school of thought we are trying to go with this new brand that we are working on. And I would say it will be an amalgamation. I would say, I mean, I don't know whether I would be right or wrong, but my assessment would be, it would be a merger of these two. Both the school of thoughts will be incorporated in this new brand that we are developing. And also more important, I feel the new brand that we are developing is now going for a nation building. It is basically, it will be owned by the Bhutanese citizen, because the earlier branding were more towards targeting the external, the visitors. But now the present brand that we are developing is actually for the Bhutanese, and Bhutanese will own this, and Bhutanese will work towards achieving or delivering the brand promise, which Foreign Secretary has been actually emphasizing, is not really about the brand promise, but how do you deliver? So with this new brand, I think Bhutanese will own this, and Bhutanese will try to deliver that. So this would be my my views now.
Thank you, DG. Thank you. We are almost at the end of the seminar, but since we got delayed by a few minutes when we started, so maybe a few more questions. There are so many questions on Slido. I will have to use my moderator's discretion to pick up and ask the most relevant ones, at least in my opinion. So my apologies to those whose questions I'm not able to raise here. Certainly one thing we have to talk about, there is a question on that as well, is the investment part. So branding with this company or countries, we know billions are spent on branding. Is it always necessary that we have to spend huge sums of money to do branding, whether it's destination branding, whether it's country branding, company branding, or there are also other ways that do not cost us much, but still helps our branding agenda? Professor or Co, maybe either of you share your thoughts.
I mean, I mentioned Red Bull. I was just there. I'm about to publish a case study on them. They spend more than 30% of their revenues on marketing. But each can of Red Bull is twice the price per volume than its nearest competitor. They grew 24% last year, and they grew a large number the year before, while brands like Coca-Cola were shrinking. So you have to invest, because we talked about how do you communicate the brand. Sometimes you get lucky and there's viral, sort of free marketing, if you will. But Red Bull has a whole media house built. They own magazines, they own TV channels, they own, they have hundreds of influencers in the name of athletes. Their athletes were second in the Beijing Olympics in the medals count, if you just added up the Red Bull athletes during the Winter Olympics. So it takes money to do it, and it's a bit of a dream to hope this can come by itself. There are exceptions, but they are exceptions. So I think you have to invest, and so you have to know what you're aiming for and make the appropriate investments to make it happen.
I think that certainly, generally, advertising, getting your word out is going to cost you money, is expensive. And in today's world, if you can't get your message into the mobile phone of the members of your audience, then you're never going to reach them. So you have to find some way to get your message into that mobile phone. Now, having said that, there are things that you can, there's mileage you can get for free, as it were, with no additional dollar cost. I can immediately think of two examples. One, politicians, because they make the news all the time, right? And the foreign media companies, and both foreign and domestic, they are spending the money to get the news from elected politicians. So elected politicians actually have a incredible scope to communicate ideas that would build the soft power and the country brand of their own nations. And if they knew how to use this power more effectively, then I mean, the mileage is tremendous. I think the best current example is President Zelensky of Ukraine. Look at what he is doing to building brand Ukraine. That's the first group of elected politicians, or they may be unelected, but they still have a loud voice, like Donald Trump in America. The second group are just influential people, whether they be celebrities from music, movies, sports heroes, or any kind of influencer nowadays on social media. And if a country, a government wanted to do something to build the country brand, they could enlist the help of these influencers, either influencing the influencers directly or indirectly, to amplify or to disseminate messages that would collectively contribute to building the country brand.
And just to finish that up, I mean, both Ko and I were speaking about raising expectations. So advertising, those kind of messaging, that's all about setting expectations. But branding is actually delivering on all those expectations. So the real costs are delivering on it. And it's still, as I mentioned, for tourism, it's at the embassy, at the airport, in the taxi, your tour guide, the people you meet, they all communicate the brand Bhutan. So, you know, those are the collective costs which far outweigh, you know, in some sense, the effort and investment that you need to make it happen. So, you know, branding is not just about creating the expectation, it's about delivering as well. So the costs are, you know, much greater than just the communication budget.
Thank you so much, Professor, for in fact emphasizing on the delivery part. There, in fact, is a question on that, but I think earlier Foreign Secretary emphasized also on the importance of not just having catchy taglines and whatever, but the importance of delivery, and you just reiterated that. Thank you so much, and Ko also for bringing that that aspect of technology, social media, etc., as important channels or tools for branding in the 21st century context. So we will take, there is one specific question to DG Tourism, and then we will wrap up. The question basically, I guess, is from the hospitality sector, especially hoteliers. So what is really TCB's expectations, particularly in light of the recent developments and our seminar on branding, the importance of branding? So what really is TCB's expectation from the hospitality industry, particularly providers of food and accommodation, to help or contribute in building a strong brand Bhutan? That's the question. So you're muted.
Lars, thank you very much. Yes, definitely, especially from the hospitality sector, the hotels will be playing the biggest role actually. So when the tourist visitors come here, they will be using the accommodation, they will be using their foods and other services. So what we are saying is now the expectation from the visitors coming to Bhutan in future, all the expectations will be raised, because now I think some media communication has gone globally of the fact that the SDF has raised, which used to be 65 for the last 30 years, now we have raised to 200. So therefore, when the fees are raised, definitely the other services, the call standards, and will be also, they will also expect it to be raised. So therefore, we believe that, and also request our hospitality sectors to step up their services, their quality of services, whether it be the rooms, whether it be the food that they service, whether the drinks that is served, it has to be very authentic and it has to be of the quality. Of course, in the past, we know because of our own system, they have a lot of compromises have to be made, especially in the hotel sector. A lot of undercutting was taking place, and that was leading to the lowering of the services. So therefore, that is something that now should be a thing of past. And now going forward, I think we have to give them the best service, quality services possible. As earlier, Professor Dr. Tabusili was saying, it will now totally depend on them. They will have a huge role to play, the guides, the tour operators, the hotel industry, and of course the taxi drivers, the transport. I mean, all actually. Plus,
can I just add that you have your national happiness index. That's actually a KPI, right? It's a key performance indicator. If you can sort of translate that for, it's not just a tasty meal, but it was a happy experience in the restaurant. Was your stay at the hotel a happy stay, not just a satisfactory one? You can actually think about one broader concept and thinking about delivering it by having the right measurement system in place. So, if you can work with your partners on the ground in the hospitality index to add that dimension, whatever it might be, that's one way to align. So metrics might be one way to align the efforts into one direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. So thank you so much. There are a lot of questions still there. We will need to find time in the future, as I mentioned earlier, to now maybe have more targeted, more focused, theme-based discussion on carrying forward this particular seminar on branding. I do hope our audience will join then and have the questions raised again. Before I hand over to my research officer, Hom, to propose the vote of thanks, I would like to offer a minute or so to all our 4 panelists, if you have any final thoughts to share.
I wish you luck, and I look forward to one day visiting you in Bhutan.
Thank you so much, Professor. Ko, any final thoughts?
I think that the Bhutan's gross national happiness index has great potential to contribute to the country brand. It's something that not many people fully understand. To me, it is a wonderful a tool that anyone working in government anywhere in the world should take a look at, because it's perfect for what is being called the great reset of recovering from this pandemic, when we need to look at every public policy in all its dimensions, and certainly not only in its own silos. So I think you should put a lot more effort to letting more people really fully appreciate the potential of the gross national happiness.
Thank you, Ko. Thank you so much. Madam Secretary, any final thoughts?
Yes, thank you. To Mr. Ko, say the UN General Assembly is coming up. I request everyone to follow the UN Secretary General's report, Our Common Agenda. So many common elements with our GNH policy. But for today's participants, and mostly my messaging is for the large number of our own Bhutanese compatriots, I would say it's all about us. Whether it's branding and branding that is related to nation building, whether it's tourism, whether it's a civil service, whether it's other agencies, whether it's investment, it's all about us lah, and it's all in our hands lah. And I think the changes are transformative, even very challenging. But I think that His Majesty the King believes that Bhutanese people are up to any challenge lah. So it's all in our hands to make sure that nation building works, and that contributes to the nation branding, and the branding contributes equally to nation building. Lasla.
Lasla, thank you. DG, any final thoughts?
Last, thank you very much first to Director, and also special thanks to our Dr. Tabusali and Mr. Kovaksang for such an insightful talk, and it was really a learning opportunity for me. And to my other audience here, especially now we are very excited about our formal reopening on 23rd September, and also the launch of the new brand Bhutan on 22nd September. So for me, it's a tourism event, but for you all, I think it will be a nation building event. So it is going to be a national event. So like to request your full support and participation, and of course the good luck and prayers for a successful launch and for a successful reopening of tourism. So thank you very much.
Lasla, thank you. On that very hopeful and positive note, let me also thank all our esteemed panelists, particularly Professor Tabasoli and Mr. Kovaksang for taking time out and participating in this long seminar, indeed, despite your busy schedules. Definitely, we want to carry this forward, and your contributions and support in the future will be immensely helpful to us. We today tried to cover a lot of grounds, from branding, from a product, a company, institution, place, all the way to a nation kind of perspective. And I do hope that our audience benefited from the insights shared today. And we look forward to your participation in the future also. So thank you so much once again. I now hand over to Yeshe for the word of thanks.
Your Excellencies, panelists, doctors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. My name is Yeshe Omdendo, and I'm a research officer at RIGSS. As we close this very educative and enriching policy seminar, I'm happy to say a few words to thank everyone. As a leadership institute and a think tank, one of the biggest mandates of RIGSS is to promote and initiate intellectually stimulating dialogues and discussions on various topics of national interest. We do so by engaging eminent personalities from both within and outside the country to share their great work, breakthrough ideas, and success stories in different programs, including, but not limited to, policy seminars such as the one today. Hence, on behalf of the Institute, I would like to express our sincere and heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panelists, Dr. Nadir Tavasoli, Mr. Kovaksang, Ambassador Pema Chodin, and DG Doji Dradul, for bringing in their expertise and experience around the table and engaging in such insightful and constructive exchanges on this very important topic on branding, understanding the concept and the scope of its application. Branding is a concept so widely talked about and followed by different businesses, organizations, and countries all around the world to gain traction and recognition in their respective spheres. However, this concept is still very new in our country, with its practice limited only to the tourism and business sectors. After today's insightful seminar, we hope that the scenario changes. By providing relevant real-life examples, our panelists today educated us on the what, how, and who of brands and branding, the significance of building a brand from inside out, and the importance of creating a people-centric brand by considering all the touch points. We learned about the crucial role branding plays in an organization and a strategic role in tourism development, foreign policies, and diplomatic relations of a country. Most of all, our panelists underlined the significant role good leadership plays in nation branding, which in turn contributes towards nation building. In his book, Brand Singapore, Mr. Ko Bak Song, highlighting the importance of nation branding rights, I quote, "As a country, you can be paradise on earth, but it's no good at all if no one knows," unquote. Till now, branding has mostly been associated with the commercial space, a scenario we hope today's seminar has been able to influence. Besides products and services, branding can be applied to leaders, organizations, and the nation at large, and this realization is important for us to look and contribute towards branding more holistically to derive its many benefits. Against the backdrop of the major and very exciting transformative reforms that our country is currently undergoing, there is an urgency to discuss and reflect upon new and thought-provoking ideas, and branding is one such concept. As emphasized throughout the discussion today, we should all strive to break out of the silos culture and work towards building an authentic, exemplary, and dependable brand Bhutan. Because, as one of our panelists shared, it is not what you promise, but what you deliver. Your Excellencies, Dashus, distinguished guests, and all the participants joining us from both within and outside Bhutan, thank you so much for engaging with us in the seminar today. We hope that the ideas and discussions that were sparked today on this very important topic do not fade away with time. Instead, may this be just the beginning, and may the conversation on branding and its application continue so that we reap the fullest benefits it presents, as rightfully underscored by our panelists today. Thank you, and Tashi Dilek.